Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Crack a Pack a Day. Every day, I'm going to open a booster pack of Magic the Gathering cards and evaluate the contents, choosing one of them to take, as if I were taking part in a draft and this was pack one, pick one. It's Throwback Thursday here on Crack a Pack a Day, so today we're going to open a pack of the Magic 2015 core set, or M15 for short. Despite being a core set, M15 had some oddities in its power level. In particular, White had some very powerful commons, which led to decks filled with efficient token makers and boosted by mass pump spells. Generally, unless we open one of the power commons in our first pack, then it's probably not worth moving into White, as it had such a deep pool of cards that you could easily be fooled into thinking that it was open when it actually wasn't. With that in mind, let's crack this pack and take a look. Our first card is Void Snare, a sorcery for a blue. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. This isn't a bad card in an aggressive deck, or one that tries to get some good creatures down and then prevent your opponent from stopping them. Using cheap bounce spells like this can set your opponent back by a turn for the cost of only 1 mana, so if you're racing, this can be quite powerful. The weakness of this card is that it's not a permanent solution to your opponent's creatures. You're losing a card to temporarily deal with theirs, making it not ideal in a control deck. Overall, this is a good card in the right deck, but you don't want to take this first. Inferno Fist is an aura for 1 and a red. It enchants a creature you control, which gets +2/+0. You can also pay a red and sacrifice this card to deal 2 damage to target creature or player. This isn't too bad for an aura. You're going to want to wait until your opponent taps out before you play it, so you don't get 2-for-1, and you're probably going to want to play it on an evasive creature since it doesn't give a toughness bonus. Once it's in play, then you can also deal 2 damage at instant speed to any creature or player by sacrificing the card. That helps to mitigate the 2-for-1 potential, since you can activate the ability in response to your opponent's removal and still get something out of it. Overall, this is an okay card that you have to be careful about casting. It's almost certainly not worth taking first, though. Zoff Shade is a 2/2 shade for 3 and a black. You can pay 2 and a black to give it +2/+2 until end of turn. A 2/2 for 4 is horrible on the vanilla test, but you're not going to want this card for its early game potential. Zoff Shade is what is commonly referred to as a mana sink, a card that you can spend your excess mana on later in the game if you've got nothing better to do with it. It's not hard to see that this can be a 6/6 in the later turns of the game, and the threat of activation can make blocking decisions difficult for your opponent. Unfortunately, this card doesn't really help you too much when you're losing. It's okay, but you'd probably rather have a larger creature for a higher cost rather than have to pay to pump it every turn. Overall, this is an acceptable finisher, but it's not really powerful enough to consider as a pack one, pick one. Charging Rhino is a 4/4 Rhino for 3 green. It can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. A 4/4 for 5 is reasonable, though unexciting. The ability makes it a bit better, though. One of the weaknesses of middle-sized creatures like this is that they can be double-blocked and killed by your opponent's earlier drops. However, Charging Rhino's ability prevents that from happening. The only things you have to be worried about are creatures with Death Touch and individually bigger creatures. Overall, this is a pretty nice card in green, but I don't think it's powerful enough to take it as my first pick. Bronze Sable is a 2/1 artifact creature Sable for 2 colorless mana. Despite being a little unassuming, Bronze Sable plays an important role in M15. The set includes 2 creatures at common with Intimidate, Accursed Spirit and Krenko's Enforcer, and both have only toughness 2, If you're not in black or red, then Bronze Sable is the easiest way to prevent those two cards from killing you. There are a number of ways to deal 1 damage to creatures in M15, so the 1 toughness can be something of a disadvantage. Overall, this is an average creature with a bit of a hidden upside if you're not in red or black. You probably don't want to take this first though. Aresko's Swiftclaw is a 3/1 cat warrior for 1 and a white. This is a pretty aggressive card. The 3 power is great, though the 1 toughness is a weakness, especially in this set. This is a nice early drop in an aggressive deck, but it's not one of the premium white commons, so you can afford to pick it up later in the pack. I'm not going to be taking this first. Negate is an instant for 1 and a blue. Counter target non-creature spell. Most counter spells are sideboard cards in draft, and I don't think that this is much of an exception. There are a few powerful non-creature spells in the set, with Triplicate Spirits being the most obvious and common example, but you're still probably better off having this in the sideboard and bringing it out after your opponent demonstrates that they have some. As a sideboard card, I won't be considering Negate. Scrapyard Mongrel is a 3/3 hound for 3 and a red. As long as you control an artifact, it gets +2/+0 and has trample. Red and blue have an artifact theme in M15, and this is one of the payoff cards, the cards that reward you for drafting a particular strategy. Unfortunately, it's only okay. A 3/3 for 4 is acceptable, but not great, and there aren't really all that many great artifacts in the set to be worth drafting an artifact deck. At best, this is an average creature that just happens to have some upside if you manage to get some of your artifacts into play. I won't be taking this first. Pillar of Light is an instant for 2 and a white. Exile target creature with toughness 4 or greater. This is reasonable removal against the biggest creatures in the format. It's fairly cheap and is an instant, so there's some 2-for-1 potential there. On the downside, there are a number of smaller creatures that are powerful but aren't big enough to get hit by this. The criterion of having to target only high toughness creatures means that some will slip through the net. Overall, this is efficient removal for your opponent's biggest creatures, though does nothing against his or her smaller ones. It's certainly worth considering as a first pick. Hydrosurge is an instant for a blue. Target creature gets -5/-0 until end of turn. I'm not a huge fan of this card. I'd prefer my combat tricks to actually help kill my opponent's creatures, rather than just save my own. The absolute best case scenario I can think of is that your opponent double blocks one of your bigger creatures, and you use this to get a 2-for-1 without losing your own creature. But that seems a little too specific, so much so that it's almost not worth considering. Overall, I don't think this is a good card, and I won't be picking it first. Our first uncommon is Tormat's Crypt, an artifact for 0. You can tap and sacrifice it to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. For all intents and purposes, this is a useless card in draft. It's in the set as a safety valve for if graveyard strategies get too powerful in constructed standard. This isn't even worth considering as a sideboard card. I won't be taking this. First Response is an enchantment for 3 and a white. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life last turn, put a 1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield. If this said, at the beginning of each upkeep, lose 1 life and get a 1/1, then for 4 mana, this wouldn't be too bad. The problem is that you usually have no control over when you lose life. A surprising combo comes with the rare cycle of Pain lands. Tapping these dual mana producing lands for a coloured mana every turn will cost you 1 life, and will trigger this enchantment in the next upkeep. That can be done even if you don't need the mana to cast any spells. Note that this enchantment triggers in each upkeep, not just yours, so if you can find ways to lose life on your own turn, then you'll get a token in your opponent's upkeep. Overall, this isn't worth taking first. You can't rely on it for tokens unless you have a number of specific rare cards in your deck. I won't be picking this. Illusory Angel is a 4/4 angel illusion for 2 and a blue. It has flying, and you can only cast it if you've cast another spell this turn. A 4/4 with flying for 3 is an extremely efficient card, but that drawback is quite restrictive. Having to have played another spell first means that you won't be playing this before turn 4, at the absolute earliest. Whilst there are zero-cost spells in the set, like the Tormod's Crypt we saw a short while ago, it's not worth including a number of bad cards in your deck just to make one of your good cards slightly better. Instead, you should concentrate on picking up good 1 and 2 drops and plan on playing this on turn 4 or 5. It's also worth pointing out that unless you have another spell in hand, top decking this later in the game isn't that great, since you won't be able to cast it. In that case, if the game goes long, consider keeping a redundant spell in your hand in case you do top deck this. All in all, this is a powerful and efficient card, but the restriction has to be kept in mind. This would be a pretty good first pick, though I would probably start prioritizing good 1 and 2 drops as soon as possible afterwards. Our rare is Kasim Skolka, a 1/1 squid horror for 2 and a blue. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And when it dies, you put X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk onto the battlefield, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on the card. This is a pretty good card. While it starts out as a seemingly bad 1/1 for 3, it gets permanently bigger every turn, and it gets bigger even faster if you have any kind of card drawing spells in your deck. When your opponent kills it, it even becomes a swarm of 1/1s that might even be unblockable. On the other hand, this isn't a great top deck later on, as it needs time to grow into something that will take over the game. Also, if your opponent can get rid of it straight away, then you won't get any squid tokens. Likewise, if it gets exiled. Overall, the fact that this has the potential to take over the game if you manage to cast it early means that it's probably worth taking first. We also have a Plains and an Advert. Let's have a quick look at all the cards in our pack. The top 2 cards in this pack are Illusory Angel and Kasim Skolka, in my opinion. I think they're somewhat similar in power level. I reckon that since the Angel has something of a setup cost, it's the worse of the two. The Skolka requires that you cast it on turn 3 and just wait a bit in order to do its job. But the Angel requires you to change the whole way you draft and possibly change the way you play as well. Kasim Skolka is my pick today. And that's about all we've got time for today. If you disagree with my choice, then please let me know in the comments below, on Facebook or on Twitter. Have a good day now.